Mary getting that ship out? Is that what it is?
Yeah, he came to stay this weekend with her before he leaves.
All right.
I think he's 30 something, isn't he, Roy?
Yeah, I'm sure.
So he's been in the military a while, or?
I think has he been
He's
in
getting
the
to,
military
yeah,
a
he
while?
has. He's been deported. So,
Yeah.
all right.
He's just getting
Thanks for everybody being here, and good morning to everybody on the Facebook. People that's going to be watching later on and YouTube. Appreciate you being here. We're having a wonderful spring morning in May, so we're excited about that. We was talking about that earlier. We don't usually get a long spring, so we enjoying our cool weather. But we're continuing our study on the book of John. Hi, Tasha. Natasha. It says Tasha on there. Glenda. I'm glad you guys are here with us this way. We've been talking, I guess a lot of John's going to be this because the Pharisees was always following Jesus around and the Sadducees. So what we've been going through here in John 7 is the Pharisees are there, probably the Sadducees are there, and they're following the crowd, some of his disciples there, and there's a conversation going on. And of course they were always there watching him, not always saying anything to him, but they were always trying to get something to use against him constantly. So that's where we're at right now, where we left last week. They're continuing that conversation. So in John 7:17 through 19, Jesus replies to them, and I've corrected some of the translation in here, so it won't go right along with your King James Bibles. But it says, if any man chooses and determines to know the truth, he shall know the truth, whether it be of God or whether I speak myself. So they question him by what authority he's speaking. So it said, if you're seeking to know the truth, then you'll know that I'm teaching the truth. That's what he's saying. And then he says, he that speaks of himself seeks his own glory, but he that seeks his glory that sent him, which is talking about Father, the same is true. And no wrongfulness, they put the word unrighteousness in there, but it means wrongfulness. No wrongfulness is in him. In other words, I'm not doing anything wrong. If you were really seeking the truth, my words are truthful and what I'm doing is truth. And they were upset because he had healed somebody on the Sabbath earlier. Then he said, did not Moses give you the law, and yet none of you keeps the law? Why go you about to kill me? And Dawn and I was talking earlier today, and she said, nobody ever talks about this, but one of the first commandments was, do not kill, thou shalt not kill. And yet they wanted to kill Jesus, and they sought many times to stone Jesus. And how many people did they stone because of their law? I mean, that's the first question they should have had. If we're following our commandments and it says do not kill, and then we stone people to death, so they broke the law all the time. So the only body they wanted to follow the law was the people they had control over. And so when it says you seek his glory, remember the word glory means the view and perception of Father. So when we choose to become fully spiritually aware, we know in our heart awareness that we are expressing the cosmic Christ that's within inside of us. However, because we have the power of choice, we can use this inner spirit, teaching of spirit, not for selfish gains, but for righteous gains, for loving gains. But a lot of times people use it for selfish gains. So for those who are new to that term cosmic Christ, I'll explain that. Cosmic Christ is, in my estimation, is a spiritual idea that expands traditional understandings of the word Christ. Particularly, people believe it's the historical person, Jesus. But it's a more broader understanding. It's a universal presence. It's that presence that influences our spiritual being, if you would. So the word Christ, as I've said before, it actually means contact. But Christ is the divine idea that contains all the ideas. And we have that within inside of us. So literally, we are the Christ. We're not necessarily manifesting the Christ, but we are the Christ. And the Christ, the divine idea, the universal presence and influence, if it's allowed, and see, it's supposed to influence the entire world. We're supposed to influence our entire world. So if it's allowed, it will touch every part of our life, and it will touch every part of our world. And that's why we quite often say, Lord, spring up a well within inside of me. Now I know what that means. I want that well of understanding, that well of wisdom, the well of knowledge, the well of life to spring up inside of all of us. So if we do that, then it plays a great role in our life of unfolding wisdom and knowledge and understanding from the divine mind. And when we use the word Christ, we speak of our Christ consciousness and not Jesus. And many people, when they talk, they use the word Christ referring to Jesus. And I understand, because that's what we were taught, and that's what the Bible says a lot of times. So this cosmic Christ symbolizes our central existence with Father. And when we realize it, it is the state of being that brings the experience that all people are interconnected with one another. And also it brings the experience of living out of our divine mind. Where more and more of our life, we're attuned to Spirit. And on a day-to-day basis, Spirit speaks to us, and we speak for Spirit. And we begin to realize that we're not just these physical flesh and blood bodies, but we are literally spiritual beings. And if we could just really open up our single eye and see people for who they are, we would see energy all over the place. So, of course, not all people are aware of that fact. Therefore, they live as a daimon. You remember what a daimon is? It's a supernatural spirit with a bad character. So we are all supernatural. Everybody. The people that's done the most horrible things that you can think of, they're other than just physical. They're spirit, but because of things that's happened to them, because of what they identified with, what was taught to them, whatever, then they take on a bad character and begin to function out of that. And some of them can be really, really bad. And some of them can just be, they don't do things that represent who they are. But we don't want that. Jesus said all people are holy. And of course, but he said few people live that life. And I'm believing that more and more people are going to learn that they are holy. And there needs to be people like us that go out and tell people that. If they're willing to let us to do that, we can correct their identity and we can help them. Later in my notes, but I wrote this: if you're healing people spiritually, that doesn't mean just physically. You're healing what's been done to them. You heal their awareness about them, whatever. If you're healing people, then you are functioning as Jesus did, because that's what we're here to do, is heal people of whatever's been put on them. So this cosmic Christ awareness helps us go beyond individual identity and our historical context, if you would. And we still remain in the world, but we're not of the world. But we realize who we are. And so that's what we need to do. I'm not just Roy Richmond, born to Sam and Betty Richmond. I'm not just I'm asked this all the time, what is my race? I'm not just a white man. I'm not just American white, whatever it is we identify ourselves. Or I'm not any of that bad stuff I used to think about myself. I'm not a sinner saved by grace. And I've got a list of all that stuff I say all the time. We are not who they say we are. We're who Father says we are. And we are the very sons and daughters of God. So when you know that, without a doubt, that you are the kinship of Father, your way of life will reveal that. I mean, I used to say this all the time. If you know that one of the richest man in the world, whoever that was, that's your daddy, or that's your grandpa, your way of life's going to show that, right? And so how much more if we know that we are the kinship of Father and we lack nothing whatsoever, and everything that we will ever be required in our life, it will be there if we know that we know. And there again, that knowing that we know sometimes is a little tough, because sometimes we go by the perception of the eye, and we begin to see that we lack in this way or we lack in that way or whatever. It could be me with what's going on in my body. I could say, well, because of this, I'm not really kinship with my Father, but I am. So I need to know that I know. So many times in my daily life, I experience Spirit in other people. And it's really nice. And I enjoy it when they minister to me with a word that I know that's from the Spirit. Or even if they just come up and hug me, like that lady the other day on a conversation at Mercy Hospital. She said, I wish I was with you because I would just hug you right now. And I said, well, I would like that, because I could tell it would be a really good hug. But touching is a spiritual thing. It really is. And we've been raised a lot, not in a touchless society where you just don't touch people.
Now, COVID really changed that a lot too.
Huh?
The COVID experience.
Yes, the
like,
COVID
really
messed it up
hurt
too,
a lot
big
of
time. People don't even want to get around people. So the more you become in tune to the voice of Spirit, you will have this mystical experience that where you perceive a deep sense of unity with Spirit. And I hope you've all felt that before. I have. Sometimes we feel goosebumps or whatever, but I'm talking about even more than that. You just know that you're experiencing Spirit. You're feeling Spirit. When you come into the presence of people, you realize they're spiritually tuned. And that's when I always say, whenever you find somebody that you think you know them, and you can't get away from it, that I know you, and they say I know you, that's what it is. You're experiencing their spirit. And so too often people believe they are experiencing a God out there somewhere, or they think they're experiencing Jesus out there somewhere. And it's not that. It's the very Spirit that's within inside of you, and the Spirit's within inside everybody else. And yes, we experience it in nature too. You can have a very spiritual experience with nature. I have many times going fishing or going out in the woods, or just looking at the woods, looking at trees, watching that TV series that was on the Americas. I'm telling you, I had spiritual experiences watching all that. It was just all those animals and those creatures, and it just made me in awe about the Creator of all things. There's no way all that stuff just explodes and it happens. It's just there has to be a divine intelligence, and there is. So with the voice of Spirit, when the voice of Spirit was heard in the days of Jesus and his disciples, some heard and some didn't. The voice was still speaking, but some thought, they said they heard thunder, or they heard a sound from heaven, not realizing they were hearing the voice of Spirit right inside their thoughts, but they didn't know what it was. So what was the difference? It's the level of spiritual attunement that you possess. When you say, I can't hear, like me and Donna, when we grew up together in the 70s and 80s, we were in a very charismatic church. Donna went to a lot of prayer meetings. She was involved with a lot of the women. She studied more than I did. I worked. I was busy working. I played drums. Drums were my ministry. So I really wasn't into a lot of studying back then. And Donna was always saying, God said this and God said that, and I never heard. And I joke with you about how I was mad at her because I was the preacher. I wasn't really the preacher. I was just one of the licensed ministers there. But that's the answer. I wasn't in tune like she was in tune. There was nothing wrong with me. I just wasn't in tune. So if you say, I've never experienced anything spiritual, then the only answer is like we say over and over and over, treat it like a radio dial, tune it into 104. If I want to hear 104 FM, I've got to tune it there. And Donna said, well, I can't hear that. I can't hear. Well, you're not tuning your radio into 104 FM, and you'll hear that kind of stuff. So one does not have to do something to experience the cosmic Christ. There's no list of things that I can give you to do that idea in yourself. The only need is to practice quieting the outward noise. And that's difficult to do today because we have so much technology today. I mean, we have phones with us constantly. We have iPads. We have internet. We have TV. We're a bigger society, if you would. We're not a small society overall. And so, but you can do it, and then you practice listening to this always speaking voice. It's always speaking. And as I always say, the voice usually sounds like you. It usually does.
Can I say something real
Well,
fast?
sure you can. Come up here.
No, I don't want to come up. I just want to say, I think we need to correct our language that it's difficult to do. We need to stop accepting that.
That's exact.
It's not difficult to do. We just have to do it.
Right. Right.
We have to
We think it's difficult to do.
We have to consciously make the decision to choose peace, to choose the quietness and the stillness.
Right.
It's just we won't do it. But we need to rip off the Band-Aid and say it requires a self-discipline that nobody wants to do because we're such consumers, and we live in a culture where we are receiving and consuming so much data and information from the second our eyes open. We now just either turn on the TV, or our generations get our phones on immediately, but it's not hard to do. Just require more of yourself.
Right. Right. I think Carol just said, she said, I like attunement, like atonement, like attunement.
Oh,
We need to get in that place where we're tuned in. But you're right. So what's essential to know is that when we liberate ourselves from this error of a mistaken identity, then we've got to honor that liberation. We got to honor why we can say that we're not who we think we are. Because if it's because of a law, if you say, well, I quit this and I quit this, so now I'm holy, then you're not honoring that the real liberation that Jesus talked about, where he said, I came to reveal to you life and life abundantly. And he said the not concealed word will make you free. So it's not your works, it's you hearing the spiritual truth of the word. The spiritual truth of the word is what's made me free.
Yes.
I mean, and we've had it for many, many years. Even in the redemptive view, it made me free from a lot of stuff that I didn't know about myself there too. So I don't put down the redemptive view. I just know that it needs to be tweaked a little bit, a whole lot. So what's essential to know is when we liberate ourselves from this error, again, we do need to honor it. And so everyone needs to ask themselves one question, is why do we deny our intimate divinity? Why do people say, I'm not holy? I hear that all the time because of my car tag. I'm not holy, or I'm holy because I got saved. But our innate divinity means we were born divine. We were born holy. But people deny that all the time. And so in verse 19, we read of Jesus asking the religious leaders, why go you about to kill me? So Jesus was committed to staying in tune with what Father revealed to him. More than anything, what he was saying is, why do you go about killing what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Yes, he knew they wanted to kill him physically, but more importantly, they were trying to kill what he said. And, I've been to churches in the past teaching, and then somebody else comes in behind me and corrects it from their perception, and they kill what I said. I've been to conferences, church conferences, and I get up and I teach, and then the next person gets up and kills what I said, or the pastor gets up and says, this is not to fit the views of our church. So it's ego. It is ego.
You should go last.
Sir?
He said you should go last.
Yeah, I should always go last. Then I could correct all them.
You correct them. Just speak truth.
So Jesus was committed to this, and he didn't want his mandate, his purpose, his ministry to be killed off. And so when one denies their divinity, then the denial kills the determination to know the truth. When you say, I'm just a sinner, then you are killing your determination to go to truth because you're identifying with that. When you're saying, I'm not holy, whatever it is you're saying, I'm not, then you're killing that determination. And that determination, the truth is what will make you free. And the truth is the spiritual creative activity that reveals the spiritual law of abundant life. That's the truth. We have abundant life because we are holy, and all people are holy. And we've got to realize that this vessel is the spiritual activity, the place where spiritual activity, and it's the place where all spiritual movement takes place. It's not some God up there coming down. We used to talk about how, boy, God moves so powerful today. And Holy Spirit, we'd sing the Holy Spirit to come down. We were always talking about a God out there that did something, when really it's the God in us that's done it. Literally, when we prayed for people and they tapped into healing, what we said built up their faith, whether it was correct or not, we built up their faith, and they tapped into it, and they made a withdrawal on what's inside of them.
And that power is real.
That's the only power there is, and that power brings permanence too. So, in John, let's continue on. John 7:21 through 24. Jesus answered and said to them, I have done one work, and you all marveled. Now, at first glance, we're thinking that work was what he healed somebody. But later on, I'm going to show you that's not what he's talking about. Moses therefore gave unto you circumcision, and it says in there, not because it is of Moses, but of the fathers. So God didn't give circumcision. The fathers passed that down. And on the Sabbath day, circumcise a man. if a man on the Sabbath day receives circumcision, that the law of Moses should not be broken, are you angry with me because I have made a man every whit whole on the Sabbath day? I mean, you're doing this, and the law says you're not supposed to do any work, and you're doing this on the Sabbath day, but why are you mad at me? And then he said, judge according to the appearance, but judge not according to the appearances, but judge according to righteous judgments. So, what we've got to remember here is that Spirit in us, as us, expresses as the breath of Father, as the breath of Father, as the undivided wholeness of our spiritual being, which is a materialistic mindset. A materialistic mindset cannot grasp that. They cannot understand that. And so the works the Jews saw Jesus perform, it confounded them because they didn't understand it. And how in the world would he have the power to do that when we don't have the power to do that? Correct? So they thought him to be a mere carpenter's son. And how could just a carpenter's son do this? How could Allison Parker do what she does? How can Parker, I'm sorry, that's from way back in the past. Allison McCartney do that? How can Steve do what he does? We do it from what's within inside of us. We don't do it because we went to college. We don't do it because we went to seminary school all of our life or whatever. We do it because we know who we are. So Jesus' reference to one work speaks of the relationship between action, which is work, and the contemplation of rest. He did all of his work out of rest, and he was at rest with the Father. So actual work is not merely physical labor or task, but it's a divine purpose of love. Everything he did out of love. Wouldn't that be cool? If everything the world did, they did out of love. If the political people, every law that they did, every judgment that they made, they did out of love. If the pharmaceutical company, the financial company, if they all did it out of love. If the religious system did it out of love. Huh?
Really?
I know, that's of all systems, it should be done out of love. So, I was thinking of something. Oh, and it also has to be guided by compassion. Because you can't heal, and again, I'm not talking about just physical healing, but you can't heal people of what's hindering them unless you have compassion on all people. And that's when our eyes have to change. We've got to quit seeing with our physical eyes. We've got to see with our spiritual eye. We have to see, no matter how bad that person looks or no matter what they've done, we have to be able to look at them with compassion and help bring healing to them. Right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember this. I put it on post the other day, but the word forgive means to drive away from you that which is hindering you. That's true forgiveness. To help them, to drive that away from them, if they'll allow you to. So again, if you're a healer in any way, you're doing the Father's work. And that's what Jesus was talking about. I've done one work. I'm doing the Father's work. Now that one work encompasses a lot, but I'm doing the Father's work, and I do that out of love. So Jesus reminded the Pharisees that Moses passed down the custom of circumcision, but they continued to practice that, even on the Sabbath. And so why were they mad at him? Again, because he was doing something that they weren't doing. He loved the people, and he met their needs whenever they needed it. So the Pharisees demonstrated this adherence to the Mosaic law, which is an external observance, and they were rooted in religious tradition, and because of that, it obscured to them what Jesus was really doing. They could not see that. And there again, when you have people today that are consecrated messengers and they go out and they do things that they're called to do that are spiritual, people don't understand it because they're so stuck in what they're doing. A lot of people that do what you do, Allie, the Christian world looks down on that. And they turn their back. Even your friends will turn their back on you because they don't understand it because it's always been this way. Well, just because something's always been this way does not mean it's right. I mean, how would you like it if your doctor said, well, we always drilled holes in people's head and drained blood out of them. We always put leeches on them. Well, there's more understanding today. I mean, I respect that understanding there, but there's more understanding today. And yet the church world is teaching stuff that was taught for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
They won't let their awareness evolve.
Now, I know, at all. Well, it's because they're waiting for Jesus to come back. That's been the hope. Get saved so you don't have to go to hell. And then, someday Jesus is going to come back. Or if you die, you'll go to heaven. And that's it. And then
They missed the return.
Huh?
And they missed the return in the process.
Yeah, and they miss out on the life right here. They're willing to suffer just to wait. Like Joanne Paddock said, they got their ticket to heaven and they're happy with that. So their actions here reflect a dual struggle between the letter of the Mosaic law and the spiritual law of abundant life, which the spiritual law of abundant life carries no limitations. The laws carry all kinds of limitations, all kinds. So the anger exhibited by the Pharisees illustrate the conflict that arises when these rigid doctrines confront this power of love and mercy. Randy Lambert's church, one of his sons has a band, and I remember when I went down there one time to minister with all of them, and he wrote a song about what about love? And it basically was, where you're teaching this, you're teaching that, you're telling people, what about love? Because love has pretty much been left out of a lot of it. And people would say, I love you, but they always had a but to it. And then they would go about trying to change your life. So rather than seeing healing as the fulfillment of the spiritual law, they were imprisoned by their interpretations of what they were seeing. They were imprisoned by their fear that he was going to do away with their power over the people, right? And that happens a lot. I've had a lot of ministers tell me in the past that my people are not mature enough to hear what you're saying. What he's saying is, I don't want to let you grow them up. I want them to stay immature. And so today, consecrated messengers experience that same anger. They get mad. And I think sometimes it's mad because they don't know it. I think sometimes you get upset and you hide it, but that you don't know it, or you're not able to teach this way. And so Jesus' challenge to them underscores this lesson that spiritual growth requires an openness. It requires a willingness for the unfolding of the divine wisdom that calls us to act out of compassion and empathy and understanding. But there has to be this willingness. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they really never entered into any kind of spiritual awareness at all. The Essenes did. That was the mystics, the third sect of the Jews, but they did. But there came a time with David, King David. He's often depicted as imparting wisdom to his son. If you read Psalms and Proverbs and different books like that, he's always talking about wisdom. And he always told Solomon to seek wisdom. And wisdom was personified as the feminine pronoun several times. It always said her. When I was younger, didn't know a lot about it, I always wondered why he said her, but I never really studied it out. But wisdom is chakma in the Hebrew, and it's personified as a woman in these texts, leading to the interpretation of this imagery of the concept of divine wisdom emanating from Father or emanating from Spirit. Spirit is also feminine. So leaning to our divine mind is knowing spiritual intuition. That's what that is. And the voice of the Spirit within us and the understanding and this mental action based on the Logos. So wisdom includes judgment, proper judgment. It includes discrimination, intuition, and all the departments of awareness come under the head of knowing. These heart awareness, your conscious awareness, your subconsciousness, they all need to be included in this spiritual knowing, the knowing capacity that goes beyond intellect. There is a lot of intellectual knowledge out there, but if it's apart from spiritual knowledge, it's not permanent. It's not perfect. So all knowledge needs to have its foundation in spirit and understanding. So spiritual discernment always places wisdom above all other faculties. And I know some people that are very, very intelligent, but they don't have any wisdom. whatsoever. And wisdom is more important than actual being intelligent, if you would. So the price that we must pay for this conscious attainment is letting go of personal self with its limited beliefs. We have to let go of who we think we are. We have to let go of our limitations. You know, you guys know that I really don't like hearing people say I can't, because there's nothing you can't do. Now, if I tell you to do something, that's another thing. But if there's something within you that you feel like you would love to do, then you can do it. It's possible to do that. And Paul saw divine wisdom waiting, if you would, at the entrance of every person. You know, over and over and over, he would say, particularly in Ephesians 5:14, and this is my translation, he said, "Wherefore, Father saith, awake, rouse from sitting, or lying in disease, from no intimate knowledge of who you are as spirit. Awake from a life of obscurity, inactivity, ruins, and non-existence. Arise in your awareness from the lower consciousness you live, as void of your true self, and let the same divine mind that was in Jesus be active in you, revealing to you that you are divine intelligence. You are a son or daughter or father, the true intelligence of this world." That's who you are. And over you hear Paul saying, awake, awake, awake. He knew it was there already. He didn't say go get it. He didn't say go study to get it. He said awake. And I believe, you know, the divine mind, we have the divine mind, right? The Bible says we have contact with the Holy One and we know all things. So I think sometimes, many times, you can hear something that you can say, I didn't get it anywhere else. Right? And that's what Jesus said, no man taught me. No man taught me. Now, he did later on, he went and studied and taught people. But in the beginning, it was the voice of God that spoke to him. And I have that happen a lot in my studies sometimes. I'll hear it. I'll hear the answer, but I didn't find it anywhere else. And if you ask me where I got that, I would say Spirit told me. I hear Kay say that a lot. Spirit spoke to me. And so we don't have to depend on man's books, all of them. I mean, we would be wise to listen to them and read them. You get a lot, I do. But we don't have to depend on all knowledge to come from man's writings, because the author of all knowledge is inside of us. Yes. So in terms of spiritual growth, then we must be able to discern the difference between freeing ourselves from insight that brought us to religiosity, which is the product of unrefined moralistic nature, or are we going to get our insight from spirit, from the Logos? Are we going to lean to that? So 100% of our being is abundant life. 100% of our being is abundant life. And the Apostle Paul often said the need, again, is to awaken to that fact. And so there again, I would say the majority of people that walk down the aisle in a religious system to get saved, they just need to know who they are. When you find out who you are, you don't have to get saved from an angry God. You don't have to get saved from what you think is going to happen after you die. You just need to know who you are. So metaphysically, the Pharisees and the Sadducees represent rigid external forms of understanding and belief. That's what they represent. They were focused on the law, they were focused on appearances, and they often missed out on the deeper spiritual truth and the essence of love and compassion that Jesus embodied. They did not care that he loved the people. They did not care that the people loved them. They were afraid that they were going to lose control, and they were angry. So when Jesus advises them to judge with right judgment, he encourages them and us to look beyond outward actions and see the underlying principle of truth and the love and the spiritual honor. And that's how we judge the world. Righteous judgments is we see the underlying principle of truth. We don't see them for what they're doing. Now, that doesn't mean I have to allow bad people to do bad things to me. I don't have to expose myself to stuff like that. But I do have to know who they are and the truth of who they are. All these gang people that have come to America, and they are doing bad things, and I do believe they need to leave our country, but on who they are, they're sons of God. They're daughters of God. They just don't know it. And they need to get to this place somehow where somebody will teach them right. And so this teaching applies that the accurate understanding requires going within into a deeper awareness of who we are and a deeper awareness of our intentions behind our actions. That's what the Pharisees needed to do. They needed to have a come to Jesus meeting. They needed to really listen. Why are you doing this? What's causing you to do this? But they wouldn't talk to him. They wouldn't let him sit down. And that's when Jesus wept over Jerusalem. He was talking about the leaders of Jerusalem, how he wanted to bring them under his wings. And wings are voices. Wings represent teaching. He wanted to teach them, but they wouldn't listen at all. And that hurts. I mean, I know the feeling because there's people that I would love to share, but they don't want to hear it, So in a broader sense, this message calls for discernment, of inviting individuals to connect to their inner wisdom. We have to know people who are ready and people who are not. And yes, if you go to people who are not ready, they're going to get mad. They're going to get mad. And I don't want to make people mad at me. I have in the past, and maybe presently, maybe sometimes people listen to me out there that I don't even know and they get mad. But I'm talking about people in my life. I don't want to go to people who are not ready, although I wish I could. I wish I could gather them under my wings, under my voice, and let them hear what we teach. And so by aligning with this deeper awareness, we can advance spiritual compassion and awareness in our relationship and interaction. So the best thing to do with people that are not ready is just love them. Don't break off a relationship with them. Still love them. And if they're anywhere around you or your life, they know what you're teaching, there will come a day maybe when they'll say, hey, tell me more about this. And that's the best way to do it. So in verse 24 there, Jesus concluded his conversation with these Pharisees, again by saying, but judge righteous judgment. So if a person filters all they hear and see through a state of being aligned with the divine mind, then they can make righteous judgment. And that's what we want to do. The real place we live is in union with Father. Father in us, as us, we live and move and exist. I looked up that word, have our being, and it says exist. We exist out of the Father in us as us, Spirit in us as us. Okay? How much? I got a little bit more time. Okay. John 7:25 through 27. Then said some of them to Jerusalem, is not this he whom they seek to kill? Of Jerusalem. So those were the people that were following him, and they were also some of the disciples also. And they don't understand because the Jews are around him, the Pharisees are around him. And so they said, is not this he whom they seek to kill? But look, he speaks boldly, and they say nothing unto him. Do the rulers not know that this is the very consecrated messenger? Indeed, this we know this man from where he is, but when the consecrated messenger shows up, no man knows from where he exists. And so this discussion reveals a conflict between physically recognizing earthly identity and overwhelming nature of the divine purpose that Jesus really had. There's a conflict of knowing somebody for just their physical being, who they are. Say Jesus was a carpenter's son, knowing him that way, or people who really know who he is. I believe the people were really beginning to realize who he was. I don't think they were all just following him just for his healing. You take Mary Magdalene, and there's a couple other Marys, and take some of the other people. They knew him for who he was. They heard what he was saying. And many times, and particularly Mary Magdalene, would correct the disciples when they would debate about what Jesus was saying or what they wanted to do. She would correct them, and she would speak the truth of what he was saying. So we are sons and daughters of God. We are perfect. We are holy. We are upright. So when somebody says something about who you are, you can correct it. But also when you think something about who somebody else is, like they did Jesus, you can correct it and say, no, this is a son of God, instead of this is just so-and-so, and get angry with them. So the people wrestled with this understanding of Jesus' identity. Some of them knew, some of them didn't. The Pharisees, I think some of the Pharisees did. I really believe it. but they acted like they didn't. So they acknowledged this a collective awareness about him, but they struggled with this. Their struggle with this was because of their perception and their reality that they lived with all the days of their life and what was put on them by religiosity. So the disciples and the observers are perplexed then, and they see Jesus speaking boldly, yet experiencing no immediate retribution. So Jesus boldly speaks about how truth comes to them. So what I'm getting across here is I think the Jews were kind of hearing him some, even though they didn't want to reveal that they did. Just like Nicodemus, when he came, he heard, but he came at night because he's afraid that people would turn against him. So this reveals the nature of spiritual strength that defies individual expectations. What they were expecting from him, they wasn't getting at that time. So when they refer to Jesus as the consecrated messenger, they touch upon this anointed purpose that is in his life, which is one who sees and understands spiritual truth. So you can be a consecrated messenger. And remember what the word consecrate means? It means to see something. When Aaron set his sons apart, it says he consecrated them, and literally they could not do a work, they had to see something. And so at that time they saw sacrifices themselves, but they didn't do the sacrifice. And so when you see that you're righteous and holy, you see that all people are righteous and holy, you see that you're one with God, then you are a consecrated messenger. And that's what we're called to do, is to go out and share people the truth. And so what we see that's not lined up with that becomes a barrier to us, and that holds us back. So this speaks of another theme. It speaks of the infinite relationship, the finite and the infinite relationship. The masses perceive Jesus as a consecrated messenger. However, through the lens of their own religious experience and the culture background, the messenger is confined by this predictable narrative of the religious people. Is that making sense to you? The religious people had a different narrative. They saw him as opposition. They saw him as someone coming to take over. They saw him as breaking their law. He didn't conform to the Mosaic law. So there was this conflict between that all the time. And so the true nature of a consecrated messenger extends beyond earthly life. And the statement that when the consecrated messenger shows up, no man knows from where he exists, summarizes this idea that no man whose breath is in his nostrils understands divine power. They don't understand spirit. To understand spirit, you've got to have your understanding from spiritual knowledge and spiritual understanding. So true spiritual origin operates in a realm of beyond the without, and instead the source is within. That's what we're always talking about. Go within. Go within to what? Go within to your divine mind. Go within to spirit, the breath, the source, Father. All of it's the same thing. So Jesus embodied that. So ultimately this conversation of the people encourages people to reflect on their perception of divinity and on their perception of messengers that come to them, that they may appear in their lives. And so when they realize there are people like this, then they open themselves up to messengers to come to them. When they realize that there is a more powerful understanding in the surface level, they open themselves up. And so you have to get beyond what you think to be true and realize there's more, and then ask for more. And when you ask for more, it comes. It always will come. And we don't want those boundaries that hold us back, because literally my state of being is I exist. Your state of being is I exist. I exist as everything that God says about me. So if we allow an unenlightened ego or intellectual rule, we will see ourselves as just flesh and blood again. We see ourselves as just humans. And so Father in us, as us, is who we really are. And that's something that becomes a brutal truth to grasp by many people, that God is in you. God is not out there somewhere. I've had people before say, you mean God's not out there on a planet called heaven? No. We're not going to go to a planet called heaven someday? No, we're not. And I explained it to them, but it's a very hard truth to grab hold of because they believed another thing that they thought was the truth, but it's not a truth. Amen? Okay. John 7:28 through 29. I feel like I've been going for an hour and a half already. Hope y'all don't feel that way, do you? John 7:28. Then Jesus spoke loud. He raised his voice because they were debating with him. They were in the temple. Jesus spoke loud in the temple as he taught, also saying, "You know me, and you know where I exist." So see there, they knew it. And I am not come of myself, but the one that sent me is truthful, whom you know not. So you don't know God. You know your version of God. You know what Moses taught, but you don't know my Father. But I know Father, for I am from Father, and the Father hath sent me. In other words, I know who I am. And I always, when I read things like that, I always think about that pastor that told me that he's never seen me as a pastor or a teacher. And my voice raised up, and I said, "You're not the one that called me. I know who I am. I know who called me. You've got to know that." And sometimes you have to raise your voice to yourself. When you think bad about yourself, you need to you said, that may be something I did, but that's not who I am. And so Jesus knew full well who he was and who his source was. Therefore, he was able to speak boldly with no fear. And in these two short sentences, Jesus spoke volumes of truth. And I'm going to close with this. It'll take a few minutes. I won't finish this whole thing. But he's volumes of truth in this. The first thing he did is he spoke of identity and he spoke of knowing. Identity and knowing. When Jesus establishes, "You know me and you know where I exist," he implies this intimate relationship between his being and the consciousness of those who are listening. I have this relationship. You need it. You don't have it. And so this statement transcends mere recognition. It suggests a deeper metaphysical connection that links the individual to universal truth. To know him is to not only recognize him as a historical figure, but it's to know him as a messenger. Most people want to know Jesus as somebody that's going to come set things straight someday. He's going to come back and get us. But if you really want to know who Jesus was and is today still, he is a messenger of the truth of the living Word of God. And so to know is important for that. And the disciples and the crowd who followed him, particularly in this conversation, knew who Jesus was, but they really didn't know who Jesus was. They knew a lot of them felt like he was going to take over the Roman Empire and destroy them, that he was going to be their king. They knew he was the messenger that came, but they didn't know to the depths of his being, but they knew he was a messenger, but they were longing for the wrong thing, right? They were longing for him to always be doing something for them. That's why he left. That's the only reason he left, is he did that, because he didn't come there to be their king. He's not our soon coming king. I've heard that in so many songs. He's not our soon coming king. Secondly, he spoke of the nature of existence. Jesus speaks to his origin, stating, "I am not come of myself." This acknowledges that the position of him is not isolated in entity, but it has a conduit, a divine will, a will. I'm not who I am because of what I've been doing all my life. I'm not what I am because I've studied and I've gone to college and everything else. I am what I am because what I was born to be. You are who you are because of what's inside of you. Yes. The very Spirit of God's inside of you. So he said, "I am one who was sent of him." So we see this fundamental principle, this idea that we are all part of a greater whole. We are unique expressions of divine energy. And our consciousness emanates from the very source, which is Father, and it transcends individual limitations. So again, we have no limitations. It seems like we do. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough education. I wasn't born in the right family. All that stuff. There's so many limitations that we have put on ourselves, but we have no limitations whatsoever. Thirdly, he spoke of divine truth and revelation. The phrase, "the one that sent me is truthful, whom you know not," introduces this theme of Revelation, Jesus implies that despite culture and religious background, the people are not fully aware of Father's true nature. And that's a real problem today. Most of your Christian friends are not truly aware of Father's true nature. And we may lack some way or another. I don't think we do. But this ignorance does not diminish the reality of truth that highlights a spiritual journey that everyone has to take. Everyone has to go on a spiritual journey. And yet very few people have. Most of them have gone on the do to be trail, if you would. So each individual needs that. They need a deeper understanding of their existence. They need a deeper understanding of the greater truths underlying in their lives. And how can others know who they are if they don't, like Ali said last week, know thyself? You have to know who you are. So that's probably one of the greatest things we can do for people when they come to church and walk the aisle is teach them who they are. Set up a real class that teaches them the truth of who they are. Not about how to tithe and how to do this and how to do that, but a class that with a comforter messenger that can teach them who they are, and that would change their life. That would solve a lot of problems in people's lives. And before Jesus' ministry began, what did he do? He got away from the crowds. He went to the synagogue, got up on top of the synagogue, and he had to answer some questions. Am I who God says I am? And am I here to take over the world? Or am I here to teach and then go away? And he answered those questions. And most of the church world hasn't answered those questions. Am I who God says I am? Because they don't know who God says they are. They know who the church says they are. And I'm not against the church. I should say religiosity, but the church does what religiosity teaches them. So the people of Jerusalem wanted him to be their king, and he could have been their king. He could have. But he knew his purpose, his mission, his mandate, and his ministry. You know, there are a lot of people that will take what they've learned and kind of make themselves a king. They draw people unto them. And I see it on Facebook all the time. There's so many people out there that they set up these systems and they draw people to them. And they, in a sense, they become their king and they tell them what to do, what they shouldn't do. And we don't need that. We need to know who we are. When we know who we are, then we tap into the very voice of Spirit and we'll know what's right and what's wrong in our life. So the people of Jerusalem wanted that. He knew who he was. He was to be their consecrated messenger. His answer was, no, I'm not. I'm here for a time to reveal Father in people. And because of the hatred that I'm going to face, which he knew that he was going to face of him, he would willingly go into the judgment of the Pharisees. He could have stopped that if he wanted to, but he didn't. He did that for a purpose, and we talked about that. So in closing, do you know who you are? You know? So fourthly, in these two sentences, he spoke of intimacy with Father and the divine. You are the beloved. Everything that's spoken of Jesus, you are that. And the Song of Solomon talked about we are altogether lovely. Now he was talking about that about his bride, but that's who we are. We are altogether lovely. So Jesus' further emphasis in this unique relationship and exerting I exist from Father and Father has sent me, this declaration points towards this understanding of our unity with God and our interconnectedness with God and our interconnectedness with all people. All people. So he and other consecrated messengers, they are of the truth, and it recognizes that we are encouraged to contemplate our relationship with Father, and to dwell on that, and to know without a shadow of doubt that we are loved, and we are the plural of Father. Everything that Father is, we are today. I know one thing about Donna. When I met her, she was 16 years old, had a lot happen to her in her life. And when she first came to church and she accepted the gift of salvation, Donna knew God. I know she did. I always knew that about my wife. She knew God. She knew God as a Father. She knew God as love. She had a very intimate relationship with Father. And I'm not saying y'all don't, but she's my wife. But that's so important for people to have that, because too many people fear God. Too many people they still think that God is some kind of God out there, that he loves you one moment and he doesn't the next moment. But we are all, Father says we are. We have abundant life. We are holy. We are righteous. We're perfect. All we need is that quickened inside of us. We need that to become alive in all of us. This quickening does not come by studying material things. It doesn't even come by studying the Bible necessarily if you don't allow the Spirit of truth to be with you studying. And so we go inward. You can go to every seminary school there is. You can get every degree there is. But if you don't hear the voice of Spirit, it's nothing. It's not going to help you. It's just intellectual knowledge. So you can take what you learn, though, and you can start a journey of learning the allegorical, metaphysical, parabolical, spiritual understanding. I don't say we shouldn't go to school, but if you've gone to school and you've got all the degrees and everything, it's time to learn the spiritual understanding of it, not just the physical word. And that's your choice that you make. So if we stay fixated on literal interpretation of the Scripture, then we view the visible universe apart from spiritual understanding. And when you do that, you can look in the world and say, man, it's bad. Things are bad. Things are falling apart. The world's going to blow up someday. All the stuff that you hear about it, but you don't see it as a spiritual. It's a visual picture of a spiritual idea that Spirit designed for us. And Spirit doesn't lack. Spirit doesn't create anything that perishes. This earth is going to be here forever. The Bible teaches that. It will be here forever. The universe has never, no planet has ever gone out of its orbit whatsoever. And for eternity. The only thing that's gone out of its rightful place is man. And then they've affected the earth. But when we get back into our rightful place of who we are, then we find the gold mine of divine understanding. And we become people that's going to bless this earth. And that's important for us. So doctrines and beliefs of religiosities, what do? They dampen people's enthusiasm to where we fall outside these boundaries of sacred knowledge. And that's what we want. That's what we're after at Tree of Life. We're after sacred knowledge. And I'm thankful we're awakened to this incredible spiritual truth and this knowledge. And I can truly say now, I once was blind, but now I see. And I hope you can say that too. Amen?
Amen.
God bless you. Appreciate you being here. Kay, see you're on here. Glad you're here. Look forward to hearing you tonight. And you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next week.